Hey guys, welcome back to another Unity tutorial by Frosty Gaming. Today I'm going to talk about the Unity interface a little bit, so I'm going to tell you what all this stuff means, where you can find what. I'm going to go over the basics right now. There's some other stuff that I could talk about, but I'm going to go through that as we develop, and I'm going to go through it in more advanced tutorials. For now, we're just going to do the basic stuff. So first I want to talk about the project browser, right? This project tab down here. So right now there's just this assets folder, there's nothing in here, right? This is going to be the file structure of your project, your programs, you know. So you can create folders and have like a hierarchy going on here. You can create all kinds of stuff. This is going to show your scripts, your models, your prefabs. I'll explain all of those later. This is pretty much going to be everything in your project, right? And you can also create them using this. And once projects get really big, you may not be able to find stuff very easily through the file structure, so you can just search in there. And that's a really easy way to do it. Real quick, I'm going to create a folder, whatever, new, right? And you can see it changes the view with this slide bar down there if you prefer like the symbol views going across versus the top down list structure. You can do that. Alright, get rid of that. Next I want to talk about the hierarchy, this tab over here. So the hierarchy contains every game object in the current scene. So this is your scene, and this contains every game object in the scene. So this contains everything in your project, this contains everything in your scene. So real quick, I can create a game object, right? And I'll create two of them real fast. So I've got two game objects here, right? And if I wanted to, I can click and drag one on top of the other, and now it's a child of this object. So I move this object, and this object will move as well. I'll explain all of that in more detail later, but for right now, just know that this hierarchy contains everything every game object that's in your scene. Alright, so next I'm going to talk about the scene view here. This scene view is pretty much your game and its environment. It's your interactive sandbox. So you're going to use it to select and position the environment, the player, camera, enemies, and any other game objects that you have in your scene. You can move around and manipulate a lot of objects using certain controls that I'll talk about in the next video. Next is the game view, which right now is just this blue skybox is what it's called, but it's kind of like the background of your game. Like if you're in a game and you look up at the sky, there's no actual sky there, it's just made to look like a sky, you know? It's like an image or animation that makes it look like it's actually a sky. For now, this is the game view. This is where you'll be playing, like when you're testing, you'll play the game, you'll start it with this play button, and it'll move from scene view to game view, and then you'll view what the player will view when they're playing the game. Now also this pause button up here, while you're in play mode, you can pause the game and it'll pause it. Or you can go step by step. I think this goes by frame, but it plays it for a frame and then pauses it if you do this. So you can see things that are happening like every frame. If we look at this little bar underneath the game and scene tab, there's one for scene and there's one for game. Pretty much this bar in the scene is just like the different view modes, right? So we've got some of these too. And you can do 2D if you were doing some 2D aspect to your 3D game, or if you're doing a 2D game and your environment's set up for 2D, this is going to be what you're looking at. You can also change the lighting and the audio, turn on or off audio. and the different effects that you have in your game. You can turn those on or off. There's also this Gizmos tab. I'm not really going to go over that, but it pretty much shows what of these are actually shown in the scene view. And if we go over to the game view and look at this toolbar, you can see that this is the aspect ratio, so you can change the aspect ratio to kind of view and see what your game is going to look like on different screens, as well as this maximize on play. This means that when you press the play button, this screen that's blue will take up your entire screen and give you a better view of what people are going to see when they play your game. You can have it on or off. I usually have it on. The stats are going to tell you like rendering stats, so your frames per second, all this stuff, all this information, which is good to know for like performance benchmarking and kind of seeing where your game will slow down and what you can do to optimize that. This will also show like whatever is clicked here will not only show in the scene view but also the game view, so you can kind of see how things are working behind the scenes while you're playing the game. Next is the inspector here over on the right. Now this is going to be a lot easier to understand once I have objects in the scene, but I can kind of use it with the main camera. So every time you start up a new game, you get this main camera, right? And this is going to be in here by default. On the right, you can see that the inspector is now looking at the main camera. It's got a transform, it's got a camera, it's got a GUI layer, flare layer, and audio listener. This is going to be default for every new scene that you have. Pretty much what the inspector is the inspector looks at the game objects in your scene and sees what components are on it. These are all components. So scripts are components, transforms, colliders, physics objects like rigid bodies. All of those things that are attached to game objects are going to be over here, and I'll explain those later and what they do, but all you need to know are the components that are attached to each game object are in the inspector. That's all you need to know for right now. So the next thing I'm going to talk about are these two. So layers, these are just different layers in your scene, things that you're going to see. So if you want to be able to see water or whatever, you can take off water if you want that. If you want to see everything, there's an option for everything. And UI, user interface stuff, like menus or pop-up bubbles, stuff like that. So you can change what you see. Layout, this is going to change the entire layout of your Unity, right? Unity interface. So completely just screwed you guys up, you know. At least you know what each individual thing is now. But you can kind of cycle through these and see which one is best for you and stick with it, you know? That's fine. You don't have to use this one. I use this one, but I kind of mess around with it a little bit when I'm debugging stuff and testing. So you can try it out and see what works best for you. In the upper left-hand corner here, we've got these symbols, right? I'm not really going to talk about the pivot, center, global, local stuff right now. That has to do with how objects move in the environment, and we are not dealing with objects yet, so later. These though, these are very interesting. These determine how you move around the scene and how you move objects in the scene. So if you see like right now I'm on this, and I can either click on it or I can use a shortcut. The shortcut for these are QWER, and I'm going to explain exactly what all of these do in the next video. We're going to start putting some objects in the scene and then moving them around. I think that's about it. There's this thing, right? I'll talk about this, and this is just the game preview that you've got down here, but this kind of changes your perspective, so you're looking at like the x-axis or the z-axis or the y-axis of the game. The top, the back, the bottom, the left, the right, you know, something like that. And it's really easy to get really messed up with it. So now we're back. Alright, if you see it up here, this is changing, right? And my thing is changing. That's because I'm holding Alt. Now the control system for moving around the scene is going to change when you hold down Alt, and you use the left, middle, and right mouse button to do stuff. So you can mess around with that a little bit. I'll talk about it more in the next video as well. The last thing that I want to hit on is down here at the bottom, right next to the projects, there's this thing called console. And while we might not use this in the next few videos, this is very important. What it does is it shows logs of messages, warnings, and errors. So if you have anything wrong with your scripts, it'll tell you. If it can't compile, so you can't play the game. So instead of getting a bunch of errors and stuff, it's all here so you can figure it out before you play. You can also use it to debug your code. If you use there's a line of code that you can put in to print something out to the console. So if you're trying to test something, see if it gets to that point in the code, then you can put it in there, and if it prints out, it does. So I use it all the time, and I'll be using it when we do scripting, so I'll show you exactly what I mean. Alright, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then keep watching, stick with me, and learn some more about Unity. Thanks.